Right, so this lesson I'm going to show you a topic that you'll learn a little later down in all your Cisco career called LAN switching. Right, this is just a little brief introduction. So I'm going to choose a Cisco device switch, PT switch that has some ports in it. And if I want, I could console into my switch just like what I did for my router here by using the console cable, and console from my console port on my PC to the console port on the switch, and use the same program called Hyperterminal, right? Accept the default settings, and here it is. I have an interface here with my switch. But for the sake of this tutorial, I want to use the switch iOS. Since this is a GUI tool, Cisco Packet Tracer, kind of simulator tool that we could use to configure the switches and stuff. And the first thing that we're going to use is the same command, enable, or EN for short, to get into privilege exec mode with my switch. I'm going to show you something here basically as we go along. Now, the same thing that we did earlier in terms of configuring host names, we could also configure a host name for our switch. So I could go again to my global configuration mode on my switch. I'll go to conft, right, and here it is that I'm in global configuration mode. And I could change my host or my switch host name. So I'll type host name. And of course, I could type a very gorgeous name, Andre Switch, which I would prefer you all use that name, to be honest. Right? And here it is that is changed. Andrew's switch name is changed. I also could configure a password on line console 0 if I wish on my switch, just like I did on my router. So I could go line console 0, right? And I could enable a password called password, and I could call it Cisco. Cool. The same command login I would use. And if I exit or end, the next command you could use either exit or end, it will carry me straight back out to privilege exec mode. So you'll learn a new command, right? And again, if I also run my running configuration file, save it and so on, and show my running config, I would see that the password has been configured on that particular switch, right? But before we do that, let us configure a secret password on the switch, which we have learned from before. So you'll go back to conft, and we would enable secret, all the stuff that you all learned before, and we call it Cisco. Again, we could still run the running configuration file and press enter, and then end to go back out. And let's copy the running config to startup config using the shortcut commands, copy run start. Accept the default, right? And we are now back at our prompt. Now what we could do here, we could either reload the switch, right? But before we do that, let us show the running configuration of the switch. So you'll type the command show run, and I'll press tab, running configuration, and press enter. And let us examine what we see in here on the switch. We're seeing that there are no service level passwords as well. We're also seeing the version of the iOS that is on the thing. We've seen span tree mode is also enabled. This is something that you would learn later down when you're doing LAN switching. We're seeing that the switch have a couple of fast Ethernet interface, right? We've seen that there's only one interface, which is VLAN 1, that has no IP address configured. We've seen line console has been configured with a password, Cisco, and we could see that we could also configure line VTY 0 to 4 and 5 to 15, which is 16 lines that we could telnet into our switch, especially when we want to do LAN switching and so on. So we have 16 items that we could configure in line VTY, which is a little different that we see on our router itself now. Alright? So if you want to configure those 16 lines, what do? Go to conft, and then configure those lines now. Line VTY 0, and it's 16 lines to 15, so we could configure all of them all the time. And we could put our password. We just call the password Cisco and press enter. And of course you'll have to put login because that is the command that we have to execute. Press N to go back out, and of course from there we would copy our running config to our startup config. So you go copy, run, start, right? And from here now, what we will do is to show the running config file again. She will show run, press tab, and we will see that the interface or the line console VTY from 0 to 15 has been configured with a password. Right? Now let us configure VLAN interface. As you can see up here, that is VLAN 1 with no IP address. Let us put an IP address on this interface. How do we do that? We go to conft again, configuration terminal, right? And then we go to interface, which we learned earlier, right? Interface VLAN 1. Okay, that is the interface that we seen up there, VLAN 1. Press enter, and then we could type an IP address for VLAN. So we'll type the IP address 192. I just given it any arbitrary IP address 168.1.250, and of course we'll have to put in a subnet mask 255 classful 255.255.0. Let me just expand this a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Right? Because I'm configuring the interface VLAN 1. Right? And again we will type the command no shutdown to bring up the interface. Right? And you'll see that interface VLAN up status is up. Exit or end to go back out to privilege exec mode, and then copy run start afterwards. Copy run start to save the configuration file. So if we show the running config, show run and press tab running config, you'll see that the enabled secret password has been there, and VLAN interface 1 has been configured with an IP address, and of course passwords have been configured on the line console as well as the VTY lines. Right, so what I could do, just like how I telnet into my PC into my router using in this case using a crossover cable here by using the telnet command, because as you can see on the switch, I've already configured first to show my running config. I've already configured VLAN interface with an IP address. So, and as well as I've already configured the VTY lines 0 to 16, 0 to 15, which is 16 lines, with a password, because if you have to telnet, telnet is always asks for a password. So what I could do is just to complicate things a little bit, take a PC, right? Select a straight through cable and fast Ethernet for my PC to my switch, fast Ethernet 01. Configure the interface on the PC with an IP address. Right? Take the default subnet mask, classful. And then I could go to my command prompt now and type telnet. And telnet into my switch. And press enter. Try this again if I have the correct IP address. Right, so if I want again, I could telnet into my switch. See, the port is open and it asks for a password.